Have you ever felt like you're living a life written for someone else? That every gesture, every word, every choice is choreographed by a script you never auditioned for? We walk through streets painted with expectations, climb ladders built by invisible architects, and measure success with rulers that were never ours. And in the quiet, when the world asks nothing of us, we feel restless. The hardest thing to do is nothing. To simply exist without performance, without pretending. But what if the very act of stopping was the most radical rebellion imaginable? The struggle to stop, to simply be, is not new. Across centuries, philosophers, mystics, and poets have noticed the same tension, the same invisible pressure to act, to perform, to earn our place in the world. In the ancient monasteries of Tibet, monks would sit for hours in silence, watching the breath rise and fall, as if each inhalation carried the secrets of existence. They called it meditation, but in truth, it was an exercise in undoing everything society had taught them. That value is measured by productivity, that stillness is wasted time. Even in classical Western thought, Aristotle wrote about the leisure of the mind, a state where one is not distracted by the endless obligations of society, yet free to observe, reflect, and imagine. Yet, across time, humanity has often feared idleness, equating motion with meaning, action with purpose. The Industrial Revolution amplified this belief. Machines dictated rhythm, work defined identity, and to rest was to risk irrelevance. Yet, even then, pockets of resistance emerged. Romantic poets in Europe, in the shadow of smoke-stained factories, would wander in forests for days without note or agenda, seeking a communion with the world unmediated by commerce or expectation. Psychology offers a deeper explanation. Our brains are designed to seek stimulation, to anticipate, to predict. Neuroscientists call it the default mode network, a system that lights up when we are not actively focused, when the mind drifts through memories, fantasies, and fears. And yet, for many, this drift feels uncomfortable, even threatening. We have inherited a species-wide anxiety about emptiness, a whisper in our neurons suggesting that if we do nothing, we are nothing. Experiments with solitude have shown this vividly. Volunteers confined to rooms without clocks, screens, or distractions often report restlessness, even mild panic, within hours. Their minds fill with chatter, memories, and plans, desperate to justify their presence in the absence of external demands. History also reminds us that the cultural weight of performance is not uniform. In Japan, the concept of ikigai encourages reflection on purpose, but even this is structured around productivity, finding joy in usefulness. In contrast, certain indigenous cultures have celebrated the art of waiting, of listening, of watching the clouds drift and the seasons turn, emphasizing presence over achievement. Yet, in almost every society, the default expectation is motion. To sit still is to rebel, subtly and persistently, against the tide of collective pressure. Even our modern lives, saturated with notifications and obligations, echo this ancient tension. The quiet moments, the pause between emails, the stillness of a morning before anyone speaks, often feel charged with unease. It is as though the world is reminding us that every second spent in stillness is a second stolen from progress, a moment not accounted for in the ledger of success. Yet, the challenge of doing nothing is universal, timeless. Across centuries, cultures, and disciplines, humans have wrestled with this paradox. To exist fully in the present requires the courage to refuse the scripts handed to us, to step off the stage and simply breathe. And so, the origin of our restless performance is both biological and cultural, a thread woven through our evolution and our stories. We were built to move, to plan, to survive, but we also long to stop, to dissolve the roles we never chose. Understanding this tension is the first step, the doorway into a new possibility, that perhaps our most authentic self is not defined by action, but by the rare courage to embrace stillness. As we move deeper into our own minds, a curious truth begins to emerge. Doing nothing is not a failure, but a revelation. In the silence, we discover the patterns that drive us, the invisible strings tugging at our attention, the constant calculations that shape our every decision. The mind, it seems, is addicted to activity, yet this very restlessness is a sign of its brilliance. It is a system designed to survive, to anticipate, to imagine futures that have not yet arrived. Researchers studying attention and cognition have found that the brain, when unoccupied, does not truly rest. It simulates, rehearses, and dreams. This default mode is a laboratory of the self, where we confront our fears, replay our choices, and test possibilities. Those who learn to observe it, rather than control it, report a startling clarity. Thoughts no longer feel like commands, and time stretches in ways that feel expansive rather than rushed. In personal experiments with stillness, individuals often experience what psychologists call metacognitive insight. They begin to notice the distinction between impulse and intention, between the roles they assume and the essence that lies beneath. A teacher might realize that the constant push to perform is not proof of worth, but habit. A parent may see that the endless cycle of planning and doing is not love, but expectation. Slowly, patience grows, not as endurance, but as awakening. Creative minds throughout history have stumbled upon the same discovery. Einstein, while lying in thought or playing his violin, reported that his most profound insights came in moments of apparent idleness. The mind, freed from the tyranny of immediate action, wanders into the space where ideas take shape, where patterns unseen before emerge naturally. In this sense, doing nothing becomes an active process of discovery, a method disguised as inactivity. We begin to understand that rest is not absence, but presence. It is a state where the clutter of obligation falls away, revealing the contours of who we might be if not constantly performing. And in this awareness, we find a paradoxical freedom. The roles that once felt inevitable are revealed as choices, not mandates. By observing, without interference, we begin to untangle the scripts from the self. The discovery is subtle but profound. Stillness is not empty. It is charged with possibility. Each pause, each breath, each quiet observation becomes a lens through which life is refracted with clarity. We start to realize that the world is not always demanding our performance, that time can be held without fear, and that the space between action and reflection is where authenticity quietly waits. This is the beginning of understanding that doing nothing is not the absence of life, but a deeper engagement with it, a revelation of the unseen forces shaping our existence, and an invitation to step into the roles we choose rather than the ones imposed upon us. Imagine a world where we stopped performing for approval, where we no longer measured ourselves against invisible scripts handed down by culture, tradition, or expectation. What might we discover if every moment of stillness was not guilt, but an act of exploration? Some theorists suggest that mastering this pause could unlock reservoirs of creativity, allowing the mind to weave connections invisible in the rush of action. In this suspended state, clarity emerges. Decisions no longer feel forced. Intuition sharpens, revealing patterns previously unnoticed. Some neuroscientists believe that prolonged periods of mindful stillness enhance problem-solving and imagination, as the brain synthesizes experiences without distraction. Artists, writers, and scientists throughout history, those whose work reshaped human understanding, often reported that their breakthroughs came not from frantic labor, but from quiet reflection, from time spent simply observing life without interference. Could it also transform our perception of time? When the mind is no longer enslaved to the relentless ticking of schedules, each moment expands, revealing layers of experience we habitually overlook. Simple acts, a bird landing on a branch, sunlight filtering through leaves, the rhythm of our own heartbeat, become profound. In embracing stillness, we may find a form of consciousness that is not measured by productivity, but by depth. And yet, there is a deeper philosophical question. If life is a series of roles we did not choose, could the act of doing nothing be the first step in reclaiming authorship of our own story? By stepping off the stage, by refusing to act out a script written by others, we allow the possibility of authentic action to arise naturally. In this space, life is no longer performance. It is discovery, raw and unedited, waiting to be experienced with unfiltered awareness. If stillness were embraced as a deliberate practice, its ripple effects could reshape every corner of our lives. Relationships might deepen, not through constant activity or shared agendas, but through genuine presence, listening without planning a response, touching without expectation. We would no longer fill silences with words or actions. Instead, silence itself could become a medium of connection. On a personal level, mental health could transform. Anxiety, often fueled by relentless motion and comparison, might loosen its grip. Minds accustomed to constant judgment would learn patience with themselves, noticing thoughts without being swept away. Even creativity could flourish as the brain, freed from distraction, navigates spaces where intuition and insight converge. Society itself could shift. If we redefine success not by output, but by awareness, the metrics that govern our lives, productivity, profit, achievement, would yield to something more human. Communities might value reflection as much as action, curiosity as much as speed. And perhaps, in the quiet, we would remember that our worth is not bound to performance, but to existence itself. Embracing stillness is not surrender, it is a subtle revolution. It asks us to step out of roles never assigned, to hold space for our own authenticity, and in doing so, to see the world and ourselves more clearly than ever before. In the end, perhaps life is less about the roles we perform and more about the spaces we inhabit between them. Imagine a river flowing endlessly, yet pausing in quiet pools where the sunlight dances on its surface, where the water reflects the sky without hurry or intent. These pools are stillness, and in them, we see ourselves, not as actors on a stage, but as observers of a vast, unfolding mystery. Every breath becomes a canvas, every heartbeat a drum marking presence. The noise of obligation fades, leaving only the subtle music of awareness. Clouds drift without schedule, leaves turn with the seasons, and the world continues, indifferent yet tender. We learn to exist without justification, to honor the silence as sacred, to find the extraordinary within the ordinary. To live without assigned roles is to step into this quiet expanse, to walk untethered from expectation, to allow life to unfold without interference. And in that unfolding, we discover a freedom that is both fragile and infinite, a space where being itself is enough, where the simplest act of stopping, of breathing, of observing, becomes the most profound declaration of all.